Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we're going to be checking out some tracks off of an album titled Bequest from an act named Said Elimam. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the album on Spotify, and we're going to be listening through tracks Dream through to Bequest from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, starting with Dream. Beginning with these lovely strings. Almost some breakbeats going on with those drums there. I love the tension and drama in the brass, you know? Fading out with that dynamic range there. Fantastic string lead here. Violin. Exploring the stereo field with those parts on the side. Beautiful flute harmonies. Does kind of sound a little bit euphoric, doesn't it? Almost feel like we're on a magical journey somewhere. And the choir in the background, nice. I love the vibrato. The slight changes in the loudness, the way that the strings are voiced here are gorgeous. I also think simply that was a very quick first impressions, a taste of what's to come. The orchestral elements, the combinations of the brass and the strings are lovely. And honestly, if we're going for that symphonic feel throughout the majority of this album, this EP, I'm keen for it, eh? I'm keen for it. I do remember it being said that it was an EP, even though Spotify is saying that it's an album. So it's officially an EP. So just forgive me if I said album before. It's here in the social media links in the description of this video anyways. But great first start. It does sound like a dream sequence, like you're planning on going somewhere, goals and ambitions. But we've got Shy next. Track number 3, or the second one that we're going to be reviewing today. Short and sweet though, Dream, for sure. What are we going to do with a bit more real estate? Oh, that major turn was unexpected, but... It's actually a really lovely late night listen, if I'm honest. Really charming and peaceful. Delicate with those piano lines on the right hand. Great development with the flutes. Great choice there with that progression. Bum, bum. Crescendo. Or the marching drums with the snares. The string floaters in the higher range are gorgeous. Very elegant. Yeah, I didn't. Just gonna take the moment with the pause there. What I like rhythmically is that we've got the lower strings having a whole note kind of feel where they kind of hang there with as much legato as possible. The dun 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 dun, that going on the sides in the mid range. And then we just have this sort of like more, this differently voiced lead in the center with a different texture and timbre there to kind of contrast it. And there's other little ingredients there that are either kind of supporting the existing grooves or kind of formulating their own and making one big chord within the progression. And I like the fact that we're building upon it with those different movements. So I think that's really clever. Great to have a pause though to go back to the keys though. It's fantastic. Very delicate high lead there. Like it's telling a sad story about its shyness, you know? That flat 7 minor 5, whatever we got going on there is wonderful. Great tension. I mean, it was short and sweet, in and out. No complaints in mind. I think that it was a very, very interesting track. There was a lot of depth there. You know, we really got the most out of those keys without being too technical with the performance within itself. You know, there's no crazy key solos or string flurries or anything like that. Anything more unbelievable than what you'd maybe expect to have at this point. It's more about, while there is like a voice to replace the traditional sort of singing, because this is of course an instrumental album EP as far as I'm aware. It's more like we're trying to continue to retain the audience's attention by, again, kind of going between different rhythms and with different instruments and helping them sort of niche each other and amalgamate. But it's also that we are not rolling with the same sort of bass line and chord progression. We're happy to switch it up and make things a little bit more kind of sassy and irreverent. And I do appreciate the effort put into a short form factor track like this to still have that variety with the coloration there and the progression and structure to keep it more entertaining for a listener there, to be taken on a journey of shyness. I mean, does it sound like shyness? It does sound like someone who is alone and wants to reach out. So I think that like with the use of the major and minor chords there, almost like the strings and the high end crying out for someone to help them. There's things there that can kind of help you to visualize what the title is suggesting to us. And that's all that we have at this point, because we don't have a story being told due to a lack of vocals. So continuing with choice, track number 3 for today. I do like that we're using keys, or whether they're electric or I'm assuming they're acoustic. Great to bring that left hand there. Bit of bass resonance there, bit of depth. wanted to resolve at the end of that phrase. Makes sense. Ooh, that was a classy little strut then. Great to have the cymbals as a little shimmer there. Yeah, I like the cymbals going because we haven't really had that. We've had more of a snare, sort of marching drum focus for the previous few tracks. Are we going to get a full drum groove in there, or are we simply sticking to the individual elements as per a traditional orchestral score? That is something I would like to know. I'm assuming the choice is difficult to make. Almost a little bit of tension and some of the grittiness of those harmonies with the way the strings sound as well, you know? Ah, excellent. Going for those low notes in the bass clef. I kind of like the fact that this is piano led. Charming. I mean, we're at the halfway point of the EP at this point. Choice? Did that sound like we're making a choice? It did. It was fairly straightforward, I think, in the approach harmonically in relation to the note choices. We would maybe go towards more of a positive end of a tail and then switch back to the minor and then kind of go between. There was hope and a little bit of optimism there, but I think there was also a sort of little bit of trepidation about it, as if we weren't really sure if we wanted to fully commit to that happiness there, that power of having any kind of like say in the matter, if that makes sense at all. I enjoyed listening to it. I think that it's very classy. I like that we didn't overcomplicate the overall kind of layering of the different sort of like instruments in regards to the harmonies they played there. We had a few neutral sort of intervals at the start, like maybe some sus parts there. We're going between major and minor triads. We haven't really had a lot of extensions, and I kind of appreciate that because that can always be a bit of a kind of a cheap, if I may say so. Extensions and major, like major and minor sevens can be a sort of a cheap way to elicit a complexity to a tone of a song. And I think if we're adept enough to be able to put all these different instruments together in a way that is this meaningful, I like the fact we're not taking the easy way out. We're playing with the listener's expectations there. I liked, as a final note, the fact that we had pauses when notes came out. We almost had silence here. Silence is such an important thing in music. If you get those pauses right, they can be even more impactful than when the noise is blurring against your eardrums, But in the meantime, we have Endeavour, track number 5 off the album or EP, 4 for today for us. Is this going to be a slow build volume-wise, or is this as loud as we're getting? Synths? We're being spoiled. That's fun. I mean, the roar of the brrrr, with the strings layering over top, soaring ahead, with the orchestral drums, the dum, almost like toms. It's tremendous. It does make you wonder where we're going. Although, again, shout out for the synth layers. It's brave. I'm glad that we're messing with some synthetic elements as well. Could be fun, you know? Especially when they're going around the stereo field like that. It's good fun. We're rolling with 16ths as well. Boom. Boom, boom. And the choir behind. Huge. Oh man, we just get that low sub drop there. It's sick, dude. It's sick. That's the good stuff. Is that an alternative type of string? Because I know that you don't just have that kind of tone with like a violin or something, you know? Great use of triplets. Damn. And the bird sounds? That inspires the imagination. Awesome. Endeavor. The way that it went, starting with those battle drums, roaring upwards, crescendoing into a peak there with the you know, that part there at the end before they got to the sounds of nature. It almost makes me think we went on some magnificent adventure that we've kind of been going throughout, of course. You know, maybe Dream was the idea of the place we're heading to. Shy was wondering if we were going to overcome the obstacles required to get there. Choice making the choice to actually go on this endeavor, you know, the endeavor finding our way through the barriers to get to that peace in nature. Is the wealth the nature itself, being surrounded in that green utopia? We shall see. Wealth. I feel like comfortable within our toolkit, I think, at this point. I mean, aside from obviously adding like the synth layers that we had in previous tracks. Again, interesting riffs without overplaying. I just think these are pretty little sort of key ideas. Almost nostalgic with the reverb tails. Strings as a sub layer, as a foundation underneath. It's nice to hear the strings following the bass note of the keys. Even if not immediately, eventually, you know? Oh, that was a fun little interval at the end. Consistent eighths with occasional rests. And a ritardando finish. Good. I think this track is wonderful because in the 3 minutes, you just literally just had keys telling a story, a happy little tale where the majority of it sounded reasonably positive. It was almost like a very calm, quiet celebration and acceptance of what you have and being grateful for it. Through the movement, the slow movement of the eighth note grooves rolling with the major arpeggios here, staying away from any points of tension, maybe going close to the sus kind of intervals, but no further than that. And it's just great to have that relative simplicity in comparison to everything else that we've had so far. I mean, when I've heard obviously tracks like Endeavour and Choice, there's just been more and more stacked on. But with Wealth, we really brought it back down into a way that was a little bit more palatable and easy to digest. And I think that with the extra context of what's come before, you really are in a position where it's a lot easier to kind of go, okay, I just appreciate the quiet time. I think that the fact that it was in that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot was good. It was nice and short and easy to kind of tabulate. Didn't feel the need to overplay any of the instruments there. There was variations within the piano parts and the strings whilst they were rolling with the bass notes that occasionally come a little bit after the shift there, as if to illustrate that we weren't necessarily trying to play 100% by the book and keep things rigid. It's more of a natural kind of acknowledgement, I suppose. I think that the songs so far have been very good at articulating what the title has been about. It has not been difficult for me to place the way it sounds with what the definition is. And then finally, I suppose we have Bequest. With Bequest, of course, as I understand it, giving something or receiving something by way of like a will, for example. I was bequested some money in my parents' will, Except I think with this wealth, especially with what we had at the Indian Endeavour, maybe it is the natural bounty that we have. Maybe it is something else figurative to that. Maybe it is the freedom of nature or something like that. I'm not sure. But we're going to get into it for the last track for today. And continuing with the keys. Kind of sounds like it could be video game music. Kind of reminds me of the old Final Fantasy soundtracks. Almost a spiritual kind of tone to them, Which is inherently fascinating, if I'm honest. Some grace notes in there for a bit of added charm. We've got an established motif, I suppose. Is this after receiving it and we're satisfied with it? A little bit of glory in that. It's nice to just gradually transition to this higher register, if I'm honest. And that's us finished. It does sound like a conclusion, if I'm honest. The reason that sounds like a conclusion is because it simply just has the piano by itself. We've had so many friends along the way, like the brass and the strings and the woodwinds and the drums and the synths and stuff like that. But now we simply just have the solo instrument, as if everything has come and gone. And maybe after Endeavor, we got to Wealth and there was a bit of sadness with the strings being quiet. But then eventually we accepted what we had, and we again felt gratitude for it and a sense of worth. And all we had is that happy little right hand melody to carry us along out into the sunset. Because this is the conclusion of my review of these tracks off of the Bequest album from Said Elimam. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name. My apologies if I am. I think that this album was done well. It's obviously an instrumental album, so there was a lack of vocals. There was like a choir in there, choir parts there, but they were only a sometimes thing. There were lead instruments within the compositions and arrangements, but for the most part, it was more about the atmospheres that they provided. I've spoken about what I thought each individual track was about at the end of each of the pieces, but I think this album as a whole, as I understand it, was we had a dream, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to accomplish it, we made the choice to continue to try and go through that journey. The Endeavor, we went through the battles and challenges to be able to overcome it. Wealth is accepting or figuring out what we have either before or now, or what we will have. And then Bequest is kind of accepting that and, living with that and celebrating it, I suppose, and showing a sense of gratitude for it. That is my interpretation of what this album is about after listening to it. And I'm hoping I'm not too far off with that. Each of the tracks is unique, easily identifiable, has a relatively palatable and easygoing motif there. Nothing was ever too sour sounding. There weren't any extremely harsh textures in there. It was meant to be accessible, I think, for people who like most types of music, but also there was care and attention to not make it an ego project with too many sort of like crazy solo sections that may have not necessarily improved the overall kind of like tone of the tracks. And we never also came to a point where we were kind of patronizing the listener by giving them too much to kind of figure out what they could have if they simply were left alone in a room for a few minutes, if that makes sense. The tracks suited their titles well. The combination of all the kind of symphonic elements, such as the strings and the brass and the woodwinds, etc., were lovely, carefully played out. There were various layers of each, various string layers there. The brass harmonized well. The woodwinds, like the flutes, were typically sort of solo instruments, although there were lead strings as well. With the drums either being kind of the sort of marching drums I call breakbeat drums, because they kind of did sound like breakbeats and like drum bass. So there was like a really interesting rhythm there, but there were also obviously the typical kind of buzz rolls and such like that, with some cymbal shimmers later on and some more sort of orchestral drums, the big battle drums in Endeavor, with us then kind of coming out a little bit and allowing just the strings as that kind of sad little undertone, or rather the gentle foundation under Wealth, with the Bequest just being the keys. It was almost like we were the keys and we were surrounded by everything, and throughout the journey we found ourselves. We learned how to be alone. It's interesting how music can give you all these different kind of ways of interpreting it, and whether they're right or wrong, you still can nonetheless enjoy it. I firmly enjoyed listening to this album, this EP. I know I keep calling it an album, it's because Spotify is saying it's an album. I did enjoy my time listening to it. I think that the songs made sense together, they sounded stylistically cohesive, it was easy to understand why they were in the same album, there was no confusion on that front. And all in all, I think that the use of the variations of chord progressions and bass lines within each of the tracks having different structures though through composed, coupled with the unconventional choices of chords occasionally without being too alienating, with a lack of severely complicated extended harmonies there to simply allow the track to be a bit more palatable through the use of the majors, the minors, and the sus chords. A more sort of like natural feel to it without the rigidity of constant percussion there. It was very much something you can sit there and kind of let the music surround you and you can enjoy it. There was careful attention to like take away and add things as we went along. We didn't have a constant kind of things weren't constant aside from, again, Bequest and Wealth when the pianos were basically the entire time. But we had pauses there. We had unpredictable elements there that even when we had solo instruments that we knew were going to go for the whole time, we had clearly deliberate use of melodies where we were very much wanting to get the listener to pay attention to, but they still were never overplayed. There was, like such as a Bequest, we went up the octave on that right hand, the 808 place, and we wanted to like make it even more sparkly, and we did that as if we were reaching for the stars. And ultimately, it was just very satisfying. I don't think there was a weak track out of the 6 that I listened to today. I can only assume Quasar is at the same level, and if it is, then I think this is definitely an EP worth listening to. So if you've enjoyed it, please do check out the Spotify link in the description of this video. But basically, you just had the studio recording, mixing, and mastering, the production, and I think that was splendid. I believe that it had a warmth to it, and a commercial grade tone to the way that things were leveled and filtered and EQ'd. The strings flooded, the woodwinds were nice and vibrant, the brass parts fizzed but not in the way which was sharp or kind of brittle. It was very pleasing to listen to. The drums were nice and punchy without needing to sidechain to pierce their way into the mix. The cymbal shimmers had a great sort of dynamic range to them. And the snares, they were punchy, but they also buzzed, rolled right smoothly through. It was very, very well managed and handled. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field. There were no weird resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum. Things were leveled well. As I mentioned before, dynamic range there, so things, were in the same loudness the entire time. And finally, things were nice and loud without pumping. And I mean, effectively. And basically, this is my review of Said Elimam's EP titled Bequest, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and Spotify page. Stay cool, stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as you need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.